So we have these primitive type variables in Java. How do we go about actually declaring and initializing those values? So to declare a variable, we indicate the type name and then a variable name followed by a semicolon. This declares a variable called variable name of whatever type name represents. We can also initialize our variable when we declare them by adding equals and then some initial value. Again, that initial value has to be valid for the variable type that we're declaring. So let's see some examples of this. So here I have a program where I've declared an int, a double, a boolean, a character, a byte, a short, a long, and a float. And in the previous videos, we walked through what all these types actually were. These are all valid declarations. So I can initialize a value when I declare it. So I can say, for example, double, I'll call this real because it'll be a real number, and then I'll say that it's equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.6789. I can initialize an integer with an integer value. For a boolean, I can assign true, or I can assign false. And then for a char, that's going to be a character surrounded by single quotes. Now suppose I want to initialize a long. You'll notice I'm getting an error there. And if I mouse over, it'll say that the literal, this big number of type int is out of range. So that's weird because you may think this is a long, not an int, but this literal is an int literal. To make it a long literal, I need to put an L at the end. And you'll notice now I have a valid declaration. And remember, a literal is a value of a type. It's an actual value that you put in your code versus a variable, which is a name for a memory location that gets evaluated when you use that. So all of these things we're using to initialize our values are literals. Now for a floating point literal, you'll notice we get the same error. And here it says type mismatch cannot convert from double to float. When you give Java a decimal number, it assumes that is a double literal. So to make that a float literal, I need to add F at the end. So there's different kinds of literals you can have, but for now, I think these should cover the ones that you'll need most of the time. And again, I would recommend not using float unless you're really worried about your memory usage. Double is more precise. You can also have multiple variables in a single declaration. So I can say int x, y, and z. I can have double k, n, r. I can even initialize the variables in this multivariable declaration. I can say char excellent equals A, OK equals C, fail equals F, and then I can even have a variable I declare here that's not initialized, like this. And then finally, for a Boolean, I can say that start is equal to false, and again, I can have an uninitialized Boolean called done. So I've declared all of these variables. They're now all ready for me, and I can start using them. And one of the ways I can use these variables is to initialize a variable using an expression that uses another variable. So for example, I can say int a is equal to 10. Now a, of course, is a bad variable name. Typically, I'm going to want something more expressive, but since in this case, all I'm doing is declaring a variable, a will serve my purposes. I can say int b is equal to 42. And I can say int c is equal to a times b plus 17. And so this would initialize a to 10, b to 42, and then c to a times b, which is 420 plus 17, giving me a result of 437. So that's a quick introduction to initializing variables in Java. And this is something that you'll typically want to do to make sure that your variables are initially set to something that's useful for your program.